Right, listen up, petrolheads. Today we're talking trains, British trains. Specifically the time they decided to flog off the whole bloody railway system to private companies. Was it a stroke of genius? Or were we robbed blind? Let's find out. Back in the 90s, British Rail was a bit of a mess, I'll grant you that. But was selling it off the answer? Some said yes, some said no. Buckle up, because we're going for a ride through the history of privatised rail in Britain. British Rail. Born in the ashes of World War II, it trundled along for decades, carrying millions of passengers. But by the 1990s, it was looking a bit tired. The trains were old, the service unreliable, and the government was pouring money into it like there was no tomorrow. Enter the Conservatives, led by John Major. They had this radical idea: privatisation. Sell off British Rail, let private companies compete, and watch the profits and efficiency soar. They promised it would be a golden age for passengers, faster trains, lower fares, and better service all round. But as we all know, promises are easy to make. Delivering them is a whole other story. So, in 1994, the great sell-off began. British Rail was chopped up into more pieces than a dropped birthday cake. Over 100 companies were created, each responsible for different bits of the network. You had your train operators, like Virgin Trains and Great Western Railway, all vying for passengers on the most profitable routes. Then there was Railtrack, lumbered with the unenviable task of maintaining the tracks, signals and stations. And let's not forget the rolling stock companies, flogging off trains like second-hand cars. It was a chaotic free-for-all. The idea was that competition would drive up standards. But did it? Well, that's a question that's still being debated today. One thing's for sure, more people started using the railways after privatisation. The shift was noticeable almost immediately, with more and more passengers flocking to the stations. The allure of a modernised, efficient railway system promised by private companies drew in the crowds. Passenger numbers doubled in the years that followed, from around 800 million journeys a year to over 1.7 billion. This surge in passenger numbers was unprecedented and showcased the potential of a privatised railway system. The trains were bustling with activity, and stations were busier than ever. That's a lot of bums on seats. The increase in passengers meant that trains were often crowded, with commuters jostling for space. While this was a sign of success, it also brought its own set of challenges, such as overcrowding and the need for more frequent services. But here's the thing: ticket prices also went through the roof. As demand increased, so did the cost of travel. The promise of affordable travel seemed to fade away, replaced by soaring ticket prices that left many passengers feeling the pinch. Commuters were hit particularly hard, with some season tickets costing more than a small car. The daily grind of getting to work became an expensive affair, with many questioning whether the benefits of privatisation were worth the financial strain. So much for lower fares. The reality was that many passengers found themselves paying more for their journeys, with little improvement in service quality. The dream of a cost-effective, efficient railway system seemed to be slipping away. And what about all that lovely profit the private companies were making? The expectation was that privatisation would lead to better services and lower costs, but the reality was more complex. While some companies thrived, others struggled to keep up with the demands of running a railway. Well, some did make a tidy profit. These companies managed to balance the books and deliver returns to their shareholders. They celebrated their success, often pointing to increased passenger numbers as a sign of their achievements. Others went belly up, needing government bailouts to stay afloat. The harsh reality of the market meant that not all companies could survive. Some found themselves unable to cope with the financial pressures, leading to closures and the need for government intervention. It turned out that running a railway was a bit more complicated than flogging cups of tea and biscuits. The complexities of managing a vast network, ensuring timely services, and maintaining infrastructure proved to be a significant challenge. The journey of privatisation was filled with ups and downs, leaving many to wonder if it was all worth it. Section 5. Public opinion, from excitement to frustration. At first, people were quite optimistic about privatisation. The idea of shiny new trains and improved services was appealing. But that initial enthusiasm soon waned. Passengers became increasingly frustrated with delays, cancellations, and overcrowded carriages. The complex ticketing system, with its baffling array of fares and restrictions, felt deliberately designed to confuse and rip off travelers. By the 2010s, public opinion had turned decidedly sour. People were fed up with paying through the nose for a substandard service. Calls for renationalization grew louder. The dream of a privatized railway utopia had turned into a bit of a nightmare. Section 6. Derailed dreams, the downside of privatization. So what went wrong? The idea behind privatization was to bring in competition, efficiency, and better services for passengers. However, the reality turned out to be quite different. Well, for starters, chopping up the railway into so many different companies created a fragmented system. Each company had its own priorities, leading to a lack of cohesive strategy for the network as a whole. It was like trying to run a car with 5 different drivers, each responsible for a different part. Imagine the chaos if one driver controlled the steering, another the brakes, and yet another the accelerator. The result was confusion and inefficiency. Communication and coordination were a nightmare. Different companies often failed to share crucial information, leading to delays and disruptions. Passengers were left stranded, not knowing which company to turn to for answers. No one seemed to be accountable when things went wrong. With so many players involved, it was easy for each to pass the buck, leaving passengers frustrated and angry. And the government, having washed its hands of the whole affair, seemed powerless to intervene. The regulatory framework was weak, and there was little oversight to ensure that companies were meeting their obligations. Then there was the issue of investment. While some companies did invest in new trains and infrastructure, the overall level of investment was inconsistent and often insufficient. Others were more focused on short-term profits. They were accused of sweating their assets, pocketing the profits, and neglecting essential maintenance. This neglect led to a deterioration in the quality of service. Tracks and trains fell into disrepair, and safety standards were compromised. The lack of a unified approach to maintenance meant that problems were often ignored until they became critical. The result? A creaking, groaning network that was struggling to cope with increasing demand. Passengers faced overcrowded trains, frequent delays, and a general decline in the quality of service. The dream of a modern, efficient railway system seemed more distant than ever. Section 7. Success stories, gleaming rails and happy travelers. Now, it wasn't all doom and gloom. Amidst the turbulence and challenges faced by the railway industry, there were indeed some bright spots that shone through. These success stories provided a glimmer of hope and demonstrated that with the right approach, the railways could thrive. There were some success stories amidst the chaos. These stories were not just about the trains themselves, but also about the people who made the journeys memorable. The conductors, the staff, and the passengers all played a part in creating a positive experience. Virgin Trains, for example, did a decent job on the West Coast Main Line, increasing passenger numbers and satisfaction. Their modern trains and efficient service attracted more travelers, making journeys more pleasant and reliable. The company invested in new technology and better facilities, which paid off in terms of customer satisfaction. Chiltern Railways also won praise for its reliable service and comfortable carriages. They focused on punctuality and passenger comfort, ensuring that their trains were clean and well maintained. This attention to detail did not go unnoticed by the passengers, who appreciated the effort put into making their journeys smooth and enjoyable. It just goes to show that private companies could deliver a good service if they put their minds to it. When companies prioritized customer service and invested in their infrastructure, the results were evident. Passengers were happier, and the overall travel experience improved significantly. But these successes were often overshadowed by the failures. Despite the positive stories, the industry still faced significant challenges. Delays, cancellations, and poor management often marred the travel experience, leading to frustration among passengers. The collapse of Railtrack in 2002, after a series of fatal accidents, was a major blow to the privatization project. The accidents highlighted serious flaws in the management and maintenance of the railways, leading to a loss of public trust and confidence. It had to be bailed out by the government and replaced with Network Rail, a not-for-profit company. This transition marked a significant shift in the approach to managing the railways, focusing more on safety and reliability. The government intervention aimed to restore faith in the railway system and ensure that such failures would not happen again. Section 8. Was privatization the right track? So after all that, was privatization a good idea? It's a tough one to call. On the one hand, passenger numbers increased, and there was some investment in new trains and infrastructure. On the other hand, fares skyrocketed, the service was often unreliable, and the whole system became fragmented and inefficient. It seemed like the only ones really profiting were the shareholders. The truth is, there's no easy answer. Privatization was a complex issue with a mixed bag of results. It's clear that the system needed reform, but whether this was the right approach is debatable. Section 9. Back to the future. The return of public ownership. Fast forward to 2025, and what's happening? The government is bringing the railways back under public control. The Labour Party, elected on a wave of public dissatisfaction with privatized services, is renationalizing the network piece by piece. They argue that a publicly owned railway will be more accountable, efficient, and focused on passengers' needs. Only time will tell if they're right. But one thing's for sure, the Great British Rail experiment is far from over.